Again, this is not Oklahoma Live. Sorry about that. We've had troubles with those intros. Anyways, I'm your host, Cameron Honesty. I'm joined by Kevin Torres, my co-host, as usual, and Landon Rosso from On3 Rivals Split. Obviously, that new combination. We're always just going to say either or. This is Texas A&M Aggies Live, part of the Voice of College Football Network. We've got a lot to talk about today. Obviously, Saturday was a big day for A&M again. Head coach Mike Elko and his incredible staff that just deserves all the credit in the world for what they've been doing, especially defensive line coaches Tony Girard, Eddie, and Sean Spencer landed their 24th commit and their third 5-star in the class in 2026 Edge Bryce Perry-Wright. This is a guy who I have kind of compared to, I wouldn't say more elite, but maybe at that time of Nnamdi Madubuike. Kind of just a really hard worker, really fits in what they want to run there. Very versatile. I think Landon said it on the show last week. They're going to play him off the edge at defensive end and at edge and as a premier pass rusher. He can slide inside. He's just one of those guys, a little undersized at 6'2", 6'3", whatever that exact measurement is. But just an elite prospect and one of the best defensive players in the class. And I could tell you from looking at the live chat when he was announcing his commitment, I was kind of laughing, looking at the other fan bases, almost crying through the screen from Clemson and Texas. Just kind of knowing, I mean, Clemson, they had a shot, obviously. I think Landon said that last week that it was going to come down to the Tigers or A&M. And, what he said D-line university, and he's right about that. And for the people who say, well, they've only produced a first-round pick for how many years? It doesn't mean anything because you look at the NFL and you see all the former Texas A&M defensive linemen who are starring all over the place, not just Myles Garrett. And I know that's the one, and then Von Miller, who they always want to point out. But you look all across, there's either rotational guys or starters that are doing very, very well in the league. So that program's done a fantastic job. I don't blame Wright for making that choice at all because he knows that, look, in this new NIL age, yes, it's about earning, but it's also about where am I going to star for the next 3 to 4, probably 3 years. And it's awesome because I think this D-line class is just one of the best we've seen. So take it from there, guys. What was your official take when Perry-Wright announced his announcement or his commitment? You're on mute.
Aguilan kind of held their breath, right? Actually, before Saturday, I know there was some chatter around could Texas or could Clemson, or is A&M even in the lead at this point coming up onto Saturday? I wasn't even really sadly around as much. I was dealing with a little head cold, but the announcement of Perry-Wright, I think that Landon can kind of give us a little bit more overview on it. But from my point of view, it's one of those commitments that you take and don't give a second thought. I think you bring him in and you start him on the Aggie program, on getting him to campus. You take the talent and you figure it out when they get to campus. At least that's my view on it. I think Landon can kind of give us a little bit more insight on the commitment itself.
Sure. You always take a kid like that. Yeah. I always thought I was A&M or Clemson in that one. Actually, right when the commitment happened after, I was told that he silenced to the coaching staff about a week before he committed, I want to say. It was shortly after his official visit. But yeah, he's a kid that you take 10 out of 10 times. In my opinion, I've heard some people say Nick Scorton, a smaller height-wise end, that he will play like Nick Scorton, similar height, similar measurements and all that stuff. But yeah, you take this kid 10 out of 10 times.
Yeah, no, I was actually one of the guys. I think other people said that. I just see Nick Scorton all over the place because of the strength, the natural athleticism, and size is always kind of funny to me because you see those edge guys that come out that are 6'5", 6'6", long armed, could play basketball, and they see. And I'm trying to think of the. I'm kind of blanking with the former Texas Tech edge that became a first-round pick for the Raiders, who played for A&M.
Larry Wilson.
Yes. Thank you. Which, I think Aggie fans who remember him know that he was always misused. If he was in a different scheme with A&M and actually used properly, he could end up being that elite player he was with Texas Tech. Obviously a project player in the NFL, but somebody, and with that type of length, you always see just immense first-round potential. So with someone like Perry-Wright, obviously scouts did a fantastic job of not undermining those issues with height and kind of, where he fits specifically. They just see a great elite athlete who, like you said, I think that's what Elko's plan is to get these guys in the system, get these guys in the program as quickly as possible, and figure out, are you good enough to play right now? Do you have to at least sit a year and maybe be in a rotational spot? It goes back to DJ Hicks, who's obviously entering, the biggest season in his football career. I saw a lot of people saying, and it was true per ESPN, or I think it was Bryce Perry-Wright, that this was one of the highest rated defensive linemen they've ever gotten, going back to DJ Hicks. And again, it's kind of interesting because you and I kind of have talked about it on the show. Like, I remember that day. I don't believe I was covering it professionally then, but obviously following along recruiting, and it was kind of incredible because Oklahoma knew that they missed out on one of the greatest prospects ever at that position at that time because of that same combination. Now, granted, he's a pure interior guy, but sometimes it doesn't pan out as quickly. But I think they see with Perry-Wright, they see that potential right away. They see somebody who plays with a high motor, who loves the game, who really just, when he was making his decision, obviously that was a very mature decision by him, because when you have Texas and Clemson, who have done a really good job recently of developing defensive linemen and sending them to the league, obviously Texas last year doing it with guys like Burton Broughton and others, and Clemson, who's done a great job over the last, basically during Dabo Swinney's career there, and during their championship runs, he knew that he could be developed at either place. He just felt that something is brewing in College Station. And I really do think personally, I mean, I could be wrong here, but Mike Elko basically switching to becoming the full-time defensive play caller this offseason has spurred this recruiting class in that way. It was an announcement saying that I'm taking over the reins. It's not what you think it is. Jay Bateman's still going to be a big part of this defense and the rest of the staff, but I'm going to be calling the plays in crunch time. I'm going to be controlling this defense, something he probably should have been doing right when he entered the program. They may have avoided some bad lapses last season. Who knows, to be honest with you. But right now, I think that's a message to these guys. I'm like, my staff's going to develop you, and I'm going to be calling these defensive plays. I'm going to be lining you up perfectly. I've talked about this week, Cassius Howell, obviously entering his final season, as we all know, with Texas A&M, Bowling Green transfer last season. He is going to be as good as Elko helps him, right? Because how they line him up as a pass rusher, as a jack, as an off-ball guy in certain situations, but really as a premier pass rusher to take full advantage of his arsenal. This could be somebody who's going to lead the team in sacks and end up maybe shooting himself up to a high second or low first-round pick. And that's the importance of having someone like Elko calling plays and helping with development structure with guys like Perry-Wright. So I was not surprised, but I agree with both you guys. I was kind of, I had heard so many things. I saw the predictions. Obviously, they were late in the week. And, it's just Clemson, who has thrived off of recruiting. Swinney's not a big fan of the transfer portal. Obviously, he's been vocal about that. They usually get these type of guys. So the fact that just A&M keeps stacking up this level of talent is not a surprise to me, because they believe in what this program is building. And we believe it's going to continue this week. But moving on to obviously the crown jewel of this recruiting class, 5-star Lamar Brown is set to announce his commitment on Thursday. Can't tell you how many articles I've done at Aggies Wire about this, just kind of leading it up, getting the Aggie fans kind of prepared. I think some of them may have forgotten that this is coming up. This is probably the most important announcement of the offseason. And right now, your cohort, Landon, Steve Wolfong, obviously the recruiting director there at Browse on 3, he was on Josh Newberg's YouTube show on Monday, gave several updates regarding Texas A&M targets, remaining uncommitted targets. And with Lamar Brown, he said the same thing you had said. This is a 50-50 thing. He gives LSU the edge, which I think a lot of people are saying right now, because I've seen that with recruits in the past who are from areas like Louisiana, who always give LSU like top billing, but there's always going to be, if it's this close, it's going to be 1A, 1B type of situation. But he did bring up that you cannot count A&M out at all, because I think a lot of people have forgotten not just of his official visit in June, but he's taken 7 visits to College Station overall. He loves the staff. He loves College Station. He feels they can develop him. So any new updates on this right now, or is this really still just a coin flip leading up to Thursday?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with Landon's cohorts in this recruitment right now. I would say it definitely feels like that kind of thing where you could see either side winning out, and you really do want to see, and we saw it this past week with Bryce Perry-Wright. It's kind of the same recruiting people from A&M in Coach Spencer Chaos and Coach Tony Girardetti. It's these guys that work in tandem and duos and form these relationships that coincide with the relationship these recruits are now having with Mike Elko that actually gets them over the line. We saw it with Tristan Givens this 2 weeks ago. We saw it now with Bryce Perry-Wright. We've seen it before. But also on the flip side would not surprise me, because I believe that the system that LSU runs, especially on the defensive line, would actually benefit Lamar Brown a lot too. And I think he knows that. So it's really, really tough to see. And I know there's been some people that have told me that he's going to decide today. But I really don't think people will know until the moment comes on Thursday. So I really do tend to agree. I couldn't even tell you who could lead, whether that's LSU or A&M. That's how close it is. I'm sure that Landon would kind of agree with me with how close it actually is down the line. Like, we could wake up tomorrow and one side is tipped heavily in the other direction, and then we wake up Thursday and it's the other direction. So do you have any thoughts, Landon, on where might Lamar Brown see himself in this system at A&M if he were to commit?
Yeah, he'd play that D tackle role for A&M. But as y'all said, it's a close 50-50 one with that one. If I had to pick a school like I had to, I think I'd pick A&M, in my opinion, right now. He says like multiple times that that's the hardest staff recruiting him right now. By far is like they're recruiting him the hardest. Also, I don't think Lamar Brown right now knows where he's going himself. I know he told several people that he plans to have a school by like Monday or Tuesday. I don't think he'll know until the morning of his decision. It's that close of a decision right now with LSU. But right now, if I had to pick the school, I'd pick A&M.
Okay, yeah, I think that's really what it is right now. This is one of the hardest recruiting battles I've ever had to predict in my life. I mean, honestly, just covering recruiting in general. I think trying to really think back to one that was, I guess Cam Coleman. I guess that was maybe tougher because I remember when he committed, I'd heard from some of my intel from Auburn guys that, watch out, just watch out. Like, he's developing a relationship with Hugh Freeze and that staff and stuff like that. So, I mean, I guess that, and based on A&M's wide receiver history that time with Jimbo Fisher, that made sense. I think that, like we just discussed, obviously, what I went on a tangent about was, A&M's success and Mike Elko's success in developing defensive linemen, and A&M in general success in developing defensive linemen. And every time I either watch a recruiting update show or anything, there's just constant praise for Tony Girardetti and Sean Spencer based on their playing history, based on the recruiting history, and based on their coaching history. So that's got to be the first thing that comes in mind with Brown, is that it's just a situation where, yeah, like you said, I mean, he's going to wake up Thursday morning and just, maybe have part of his family saying, stay home. And then that football mind going, go to A&M, you're going to be a star right away. And you're not just going to make money there and be successful, but you're going to be one of the best players in the country. And you're going to be one of the most important players in that defensive line rotation, because the departures after this season. We all know who's going to leave. We know that it's going to look very new in 2026. So he's going to have a chance to start right away and then become that elite star that scouts are talking about every day. And look, where else, what would be better right now? Because A&M in season gets a lot of coverage. That's the truth. So does LSU, but there's something different about A&M. You know, people always want to see them on the national stage. Outside of Texas fans and rivals want to see them fail, but a lot of people want to see them succeed because when they do, it's very interesting to cover. And so that's a great place to go as someone who, someone like Brian who loves kind of social media and stuff like that. You're going to be kind of famous at either school. So, I mean, if that's something he wants to keep in mind, there's something else there. So
I definitely think there's something that goes along with it where you see the defensive line class that Elko has already got verbally committed to A&M right now. And you can kind of, if you were in his shoes, talk yourself into being a part of that as well. I think that helps a little bit when you think about it. Maybe it's not that much thought being put into especially just that, but it really comes down to the relationships. But I think that once you see, you have Givens on the outside, if you tend to play him on that edge position, you have Bryce Perry-Wright, who you could bring in, kind of like you said, A&M uses Cassius Howell in that kind of sub pass rush kind of set. Mm-hmm. And you have these guys who are already coming in to try and make a difference because A&M and Elko are trying to turn that corner, especially in this upcoming season. You can talk yourself into it for sure. And with Lamar, I do think that it could also, whoever gets his commitment on Thursday, I could definitely see a world where he's still going to take visits this upcoming fall. I don't think that's not an option. I think he's going to take other visits regardless of how it is. You're a recruit. You basically are only going to be able to do this once pending any other things going on. But whichever team gets his commitment, the other ones, especially Texas and Miami, even though they're kind of seen as secondary recruiting pitches to him, I think they're definitely going to be trying to put on the burners for him as well, especially during the fall. You don't think Texas or Miami, with the schedules they have, trying with their expectations, could have a guy like Lamar Brown come onto campus and try and get on that game day atmosphere?
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, that's going to be the case for a lot of these uncommitted guys and even committed guys. It's outside of the, I believe it's like half a dozen, of the 24 who have shut down the recruitment. When you shut down your recruitment, that's why you make it a big deal, because it means that they're locked in no matter what. They're going to sign during early signing day in early December. They're ready to get on campus as soon as possible. Then there's the others that, yes, they have a pledge. They're sitting pretty. You're constantly calling them, seeing how things are going, especially ahead of their final season. But, you see every time, like Auburn, for example, is struggling recruiting right now. And I was talking to one of my Auburn guys at USA Today, and we were just discussing, what's going on there. And he was kind of talking, well, it either has to do with NIL or it has to do with just other schools are just having a lot of momentum. But he said, but a lot of these schools are waiting till August, September, October, when the season starts and when teams start playing and when those in-season visits begin. And if you're having success, and you're having success specifically at these positions you're recruiting these players for, if A&M's defensive line this season, especially their edge rushers, the new guys that came in, thrive. And I mean, thrive in big games like against Notre Dame on the road, and then we enter an SEC play. These, they're not just getting sacks; they're getting big third down stops, and their run defense has improved. And guys like DJ Hicks and Albert Regis and Tyler Odienum are playing at a high level. Then again, if you're somebody like Lamar Brown and you see that type of coaching with players that, yes, have elite talent, but you maybe think you're even better than those guys, you're thinking, well, look, I made the right decision, right? I'm going to thrive in this defense the way they're playing with these guys and with this scheme. So that has a lot to play into it. I think A&M fans over the years, especially with Fisher, going back to Cam Coleman, I remember the biggest issue that they had was, well, we haven't committed in July. What about when the season starts and Jimbo's offense, just doesn't score a lot of points and wide receivers aren't a big part of it and they're not having success? And then he sees that and he sees Hugh Freeze, who is well known for his passing offense. Right. So it's just how it works. But you're 100% correct in stating that this is the one shot for these guys to kind of live that dream of visiting all these places and really taking in what every environment offers during the season. And we saw that with the LSU win last year when they landed like 3 of their first 2026. Obviously, Xavier Tiller is off to Florida State, but Jordan Carter, I believe it was Aaron Gregory as well, who did commit at that time. So that game, that comeback win with Marcel Reed against the Tigers solidified those guys with the Aggies. So that's how it works sometimes. Yeah. Not with all of them, but with some of them. I mean,
sure.
I was going to say Walter Nolan, right? Before obviously transferring, I remember when he was interviewing with Billy Lish in Texas, he basically said that, going to Kyle Field at night and watching A&M, that solidified it for me.
Yeah, for sure. I want to say one more thing about Lamar. I think this would be A&M's biggest win in recruiting in the last 5 years, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Not just Elko. Overall, like with Jimbo in 2022, if you pull a kid that lives on LSU's campus, literally on their campus, that's a huge win.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think that because A&M and LSU have gone head to head for years over recruits. I mean, just 2 cycles ago, we saw the battle for the signing day for Terry Bussey, right? I mean, it's stuff like that where I think you're exactly right, and you hit it on the head where this is a statement win if he were going to commit on Thursday for Elko and his entire staff.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think even by recruiting standards, Landon, you could correct me if I'm wrong. Is he going to be the highest, the best recruit in program history, or is that still going to be Myles Garrett? And I think it was Walter Nolan, actually. I'm not sure.
Walter was number 1.
Yeah, Walter was number 1. Then it was Garrett. And then it was
2. Yeah,
I think he would be 4 or 5 right now.
Yeah, that's what I think. Yeah. So, but by talent stand, I think we all agree from those of us who watched his film, like, yeah, you're getting an instant star. You're getting somebody who I don't believe has any bust in him at this point. I think just based on how they would utilize him, how he would grow in the defense, how he would work with Texas A&M's elite strength and conditioning staff led by Tommy Moffitt. I mean, Tommy Moffitt gets his hands on this young man. Oh my God, watch out. Like, they're going to turn him into a freaking beast. So it's just one of those things where, yes, LSU can develop him the same way and blah, blah, blah. But it's just, I'm still leaning A&M because I just think that in this situation, when you do play in your own backyard, I just don't see that much anymore. I mean, with these kids, I mean, back when my dad was A&M in the late 70s, early 80s, I mean, that was a time when guys, because, legacy, you're always going to go to the school where your dad went. That was always the case. I mean, unless you were like the top player and Notre Dame at the time or Ohio State or somebody like that was recruiting you. It was always like you were committed to your hometown team and that was it. But that's always great. And we still see that with A&M all the time. So like Mike Brown, obviously, his dad, Reggie Brown, which is fantastic. Mike Brown is also a very, very talented wide receiver. Yeah. So it wasn't just a ho-hum signing, right? Or commit. But that's how I see it. He wants a change of pace. He wants something different. So I'm leaning A&M right now. I could be completely wrong. By the time we do the show next week, we will know.
Yeah.
But I think, go ahead, Ken.
No, there's definitely, you're exactly right where there is this pull now, especially years down the line. There's this pull from a lot of schools going out of state for their commits nowadays. And I think we're going to continue to see that trend, but you're seeing it with teams like USC and especially A&M where a good chunk of their commits are coming from in-state, trying to lock down and put a wall around the states that they're in. And you go to the heart of Louisiana, if not just Baton Rouge itself, and try and land a kid like this. I mean, LSU is going to take that personally, for lack of a better term. So I think that, and Landon said it exactly right, it would be a statement win for the Aggies. And there's definitely a lot of pull. And I think that kind of will transition us to our next segment a little bit more on a little bit of pull out of state, because we've been seeing a little bit of the national media the past, I would say, couple of days. And I want to know Landon's thoughts on it. A&M has been getting a little bit of traction for a recruit as well on the defensive side of the ball in the class of 2026. So I'm going to turn the time over to Landon before he has to leave and kind of speak a little bit more about this guy.
For sure. Tamario Watkins from South Carolina. I think Rock Hill is where he's from, if I want to mistake.
Mhm.
Yeah, he's a linebacker kind of safety. He's a mix of both, but A&M's really pitching that linebacker role to him. He visited the weekend before 20th, so the 12th, 13th or 12th, something like that. And yeah, A&M has done terrific in that one. Jay Bateman is the biggest one in that one. That's his guy in the class. That's who he wants the most by far. Just making a notice with the kid. Watkins feels at home whenever he talks to Bateman. And just anytime I talk to Watkins, it's nothing good about, or it's nothing bad about A&M. It's always good things about A&M.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's just if he can win that one over South Carolina, where he's from, that's a statement win as well. Talented
And
kid.
yeah, I think we're going to transition finally. KJ Ford. So KJ Ford, who I believe 2026 4-star edge, I believe he was predicted to land with Florida last week. I think he got one prediction there. I think you did a great update, kind of talking about how A&M has made some gains there. This is not a done deal yet. Obviously, Florida, who it's always interesting. Florida is involved because they've done a really good job in the past, somewhat in the current structure of developing pass rushers and defensive linemen. They've sent a lot of interior guys to the NFL. But I don't know. It's got to be hard now because obviously they've done a really good job landing as many edge prospects and defensive linemen as possible. But what's your update there with KJ Ford and the Aggies?
Right now, my RPM is on Florida. They've done a great job with him. It's not much of a, I don't want to say, it's not a huge loss for A&M. I felt if they would have pushed really hard and tried to win this commitment, they would have got him.
Yeah.
I think if you see them miss on a Tank Jones, and then if a Wilkes goes bad from Alabama, I think they go and try to flip KJ Ford in the end.
Okay.
And it wouldn't put it past me if he flips later on, like for whatever school that he commits to this week. But I like Florida right now over Ohio State.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, because so you brought up Anthony Tank Jones, other 5-star edge at Alabama. On that same interview with Wiltfong, he kind of mentioned at the end, he said, Alabama's been leading for me throughout the process. A&M has made a very strong impression. They love that kid. Obviously, he's an elite pass rusher, very versatile. So you're saying that if A&M misses out on Jones, that probably trying to flip KJ Ford is the main goal?
Or they get that Wilkes edge. Wilkes is his last name.
Wilkes.
Jarquez, I think.
Jarquez Wilkes, yeah, okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I think if they miss on a Tank Jones, I think they get him. Or they do a KJ Ford later on in the process.
Yeah, I think with Jones, it's always tough when Alabama, who's done a bang up job in this recruiting class. I mean, whoever, for our guys at with the Alabama channel, I think they have a lot to talk about. But then obviously hometown Alabama involved, and then Oregon, who really has shown they can land whoever they want. That's going to be a tough one.
Yeah, I think if Tank Jones or Lamar Brown lived in any other state but their home state, I think they're committed to A&M right now.
Okay. Yeah, I think we talked about that last week. But unless it was Georgia, right? If it's Georgia, then you're an A&M.
If it's Georgia, it's
now.
Yeah, you're born in A&M.
That's funny. But I think before we let you go, one other name we talked about pre-show, obviously Evan Jacobson, the tight end from Waukee, Iowa. Is there any update there? Because I think it's been a little quiet in that area.
I think it's Iowa State or A&M.
Okay.
Another one that could go any other way. It just depends what the kid is really feeling. In my opinion.
I think he fits.
But I know he's a take it A&M.
Yeah, I think he fits anywhere, and I think based on his play style, his versatility, I think that he's a perfect fit for Colin Klein. I think Colin Klein just wants to load up on as many intriguing tight ends as he can, because as long as he's with A&M, tight end is just vital for that offense to move. But any more recruiting updates with any guys that we may not be talking about that aren't obviously the Lamar Browns and the KJ Fords of the world?
Tristan Keys, Jace Matthews. I think you see A&M push for one of those two. I think at the end they might land one of those two.
Yeah, because I think that what I've read with Tristan Keys specifically is that it's not great for LSU that he was an early commit, and that obviously A&M, Tennessee, I believe just both those programs right now have the best chance of flipping him later. And then Jace Matthews, who, like you just said, out of Mississippi, Ole Miss is always going to be there first. I mean, the first offer he got. Obviously, you've got Auburn in the mix, you got LSU in the mix, but all I've heard about his relationship with A&M, especially Holman Wiggins, A&M's wide receiver coach, is that very, very strong bond, like the rest of these guys that they've gotten. So good to see, because obviously missing out on, which we didn't talk about earlier in the show, missing out on Ethan Boopy Feaster, who committed to USC. What was your take on that? Because that's kind of interesting.
It's just I don't really know. I think you just see USC be a little bit more desperate than A&M will. A&M loaded up last year as a class too, and they're already loaded right now. But I think I think A&M or LSU for Jace Matthews, and then I think you see it. Keys end up at A&M, Tennessee, or LSU.
Or just stay with LSU.
It's gonna be hard to take him off the LSU one. I think he grew up as an OBJ fan.
Yeah,
and he wants to play for LSU.
He's always here like not that. I mean, I see him play, and I mean, he's a lead route runner. Just he's got 5-star prospect written all over him. Obviously, well, he's not the fastest guy. I'm like, okay, well, we talked about Ashton Bethel-Roman, who you said ran like what a 4.3 or something.
4.3.
We don't always know yet. These guys don't show off all their speed yet, so I don't like when I think Keys is fantastic, and I think there's potential there, because I keep hearing interviews all the time with him. Just, man, I love Kyle Field. Man, I mean, A&M's always on his mind in some way. Obviously, Tennessee as well, but that's going to be very, very interesting to watch in the coming months. So,
sure.
Yeah. So Len, if you have to go, I appreciate all the updates, man. Enjoy.
Yes, sir.
And
all right.
It's going to be a good time, and then we're going to have you back on the show as soon as possible. And I mean, we're going to hear
hopefully Lamar Brown news next week.
By that time, by next Tuesday, we will be on here.
We'll hopefully have a celebratory pod.
Mario,
right?
We may have
Mario.
If that happens, we'll probably have like a quick.
And then we'll talk about Tyler Wilson after that.
Yeah. And so a lot of time. Appreciate it, buddy.
All right, appreciate you having me.
Have a good one.
You got it. You too, man.
Yeah, very, very cool update from Landon. I think that Tristan Keys news, especially because I've seen a lot of people kind of say, oh, we don't think he sticks with LSU. That's been the kind of general consensus. And I know Miami, people have said before, insiders or scouts or camps of other recruits have kind of said, well, I don't know why LSU got him in the boat so early. Well, the reason really was like he has a very, very good connection with that general manager over at LSU. I believe they went to the same high school over in Mississippi in Hattiesburg. So that connection kind of put it over the edge. And we're seeing it a lot more where, yes, obviously money is going to be a part of it, but it's a good part of it now to where the level of trust that these schools are putting into these guys, they're putting their money where their mouth is, basically. And you saw it this past week over July 3rd and 4th with the Felix Ojo commitment, is these schools are putting money where their mouth is. They're saying, we trust that these guys are going to help us get over the hump. So I think a lot of it is going to be, hey, Tennessee's getting Tristan Keys on campus, and everybody's going to start saying, oh no, here we go again. Tennessee could get him on campus. A&M could get him on campus for a visit. You don't know until it comes down to the decision, and sometimes connections do win out.
Yeah, no, I mean, connections are everything. And I mean, like you just said, if you're a kid, and especially in this climate, I'm a little old. So I remember OBJ when he was a freshman in college. I remember watching I think I've watched everything he's done over the past how many years. So I get, like, if you are a young kid and you watch those clips on YouTube and obviously one of the great LSU alums and all that, especially if you're a wide receiver, and especially if you're a wide receiver of his caliber, because these guys know they're the best, right? They know that they're going to go on campus immediately and make an impact. It's the same with Lamar Brown, and that's kind of what makes it really fun, because they know that all these programs want them. All these programs are willing to shell out a lot of money for them. All these programs have a clear plan for them to be stars, as soon as possible. But for Keys, I think it really, like Lamar Brown, is going to come down to those connections, is going to come down to his fit. And LSU is always going to have a edge with wide receivers. Obviously, they call themselves quarterback U. They now call themselves wide receiver U. It helped a lot when Joe Burrow was your quarterback, and they had that season that will never be topped again in 2019, and the way that those wide receivers were utilized in that offense. But that was 2019. We don't know how they're going to even look this season. We think that passing game is going to look great with Garrett Nussberger at the helm in his final season. But it's just very interesting. But I think that A&M right now is doing a really, really good job at kind of painting a picture for these wide receivers, especially, that things are going to change here offensively. Because Colin Klein, I think it's pretty easy for football players. For fans, I don't think it is, right? Because if you're watching a game on TV and you see like a high-flying offense that's scoring a lot of points, you go, why can't A&M do that? And it's like, especially if you have never played football, sometimes you think it a little different way. And, I think Colin Klein could just explain to these guys, and probably has, this is what went wrong. This is what we need to succeed here. I've got plenty of film at Kansas State of showing you with lesser talent what I can do. And, what we think is going to happen this season, I don't know. We'll have to wait till that happens.
Yeah.
But at the same time, if you're a wide receiver, you know that you're going to get open. You know that you have a chance for getting rack yards. You know you have a chance to be a deep threat in this offense. So that's why guys like Aaron Gregory, Madden Williams, Mike Brown, and maybe a couple, one or two future 2026 wide receivers are considering A&M.
Definitely. And don't you think that even in Colin Klein's system, if you have Holman Wiggins behind the training,
yes,
don't you think that would be a little bit more of a recruiting pitch?
I'm surprised I didn't even mention. I guess I go on tangents sometimes on here. It's like
you're good. The tangents are exactly what people need to hear.
Oh, I know, but I remember I forgot about Terry Bussey, which was like a sin at this point. So I remember it was like the first show or something. I'd go back and go, no, I did not forget about Terry Bussey. He's going to be great. I'm just, sometimes we were pointing at other wide receivers, a lot of wide receivers on this 2025 offense.
Don't you worry. Don't you worry.
I agree with you. Holman Wiggins has been praised by all of them. Tristan Keys praised him. I've heard it from Jace Matthews. He's become a popular name with these guys because they know what he did at Alabama. They know that he helped Devontae Smith be the first wide receiver in I don't know how long to win the Heisman Trophy during the 2020 season. And they feel that doesn't leave, right? That type of coaching acumen doesn't leave just because you left Alabama. It's just going to take some time, and you need better talent, because you and I both know that 2024 roster was not talented at wide receiver. That's no offense to Noah Thomas, who was a great wide receiver, but he's a very specific type of player who, when he transferred to Georgia this offseason, I wasn't shocked because they needed a guy of his caliber. And I remember the one thing that A&M fans and those of us who said that was kind of going to be a drop off was his red zone ability because of his length and his height. Is 6'5", he's a big target in the end zone. But overall, I wouldn't call Noah Thomas like an elite wide receiver that if you lose him, your program's in shambles, right? That's just what I'm seeing. But I see what they're building. You see guys like Terry Buss who are now in the building. You see Casey Concepcion who's here. You see Mario Craver, who has an extremely bright future. And we've talked enough about Isaiah Williams and Ashton Bethel-Roman, who are being highly underrated by – we're about to talk about college football 26 in the video game.
That'll be a fun coming up.
And but the future is so bright because I've been – Madden Williams follows our coverage at Aggies Wire very closely. He's good. He's an awesome dude. If you're ever watching the show, Madden, we think the world of you, and we can't wait to watch you.
We really do.
One of the best route runners I've seen, one of the guys that watching his improvement this summer during various camps, he's going to be a major threat at the college level just because he's refining that technique. He's a bigger guy. He's showing off some speed. He looks like he can, beat those one-on-ones on the boundary. And then you've got Aaron Gregory, who we all think is going to be a huge star at the next level, possesses all of those elite traits you need to be a wide receiver. So it's not – it's not dumb to say the future is bright there, because it's much brighter than it really was under Jimbo Fisher, outside of Evan Stewart and a couple other names who just did not pan out because of various personal and scheme related reasons. But I personally know that Colin Klein, from those who follow Kansas State, beat writers at Kansas State, everybody who understood his scheme, what they did at Kansas State during his playing days, it's wide receiver friendly when it works.
It
right?
very, very much is.
That's why. So it's that combination of Klein and Holman Wiggins. And it's
going to be a very interesting re-recruitment as we head up towards the fall season. And I think I'll put my stance on it now. Everybody saw Calvin Russell being recruited by Syracuse this past week.
Yep.
I think that is someone that Miami, who has been in the Keys conversation before, I think that is someone that they might turn their heads to and say, I think we can actually go out and get this guy because he is from our backyard in Florida. And we do believe that he is this 5-star caliber that we really, really want. Maybe that means that they have lost a little bit of confidence in them trying to sway Keys away from LSU. I agree with a lot of people in that Keys does not stick with LSU. So I think that he will either flip to Tennessee or Texas A&M. I think that is a very, very sound logic when it comes to it.
Yeah, no, I personally believe, I agree with you. I personally believe that Keys is really just going to consider those two programs. I think it is compared to Jace Matthews. I think he's probably going to stay home or going to, especially if Keys flips, I think he's going to be an LSU commit. I think that's kind of just what's going to happen. It's just going to be, we got an opening. Jace, I believe, is on that cusp of elite tier. He's one of those rising prospects, excellent route runner, has a lot of speed, is being sought after by every big program right now. So if LSU were to lose Keys to A&M or Tennessee, I see Jace Matthews kind of slipping in to that position. But right now,
I agree with you there.
Landon said it best, and I'm glad he said that. A&M is in good position at wide receiver either way. They want to land another guy just to be sure. They also know that if they don't, they're still fine, and they can go into the transfer portal if they want to add another guy like Casey Concepcion, who I believe that if Casey Concepcion has a great season, which we all expect him to have, I think it's going to be easier to go in the portal and land another guy like that who's just going to be a plug-and-play option. So I think at wide receiver, nobody should be worrying, because I still think that the biggest recruitment shutdowns, yes, getting both your running backs, KJ Edwards and Jonathan Hatton to shut down the recruitments, that was huge, right? Huge for your backfield. And basically solidifying your offensive linemen, some of those guys as well. That's also big. That's going to be a position we talked about on the show, which they may have to really utilize the portal more in the future, especially after the assumed departures after this season. But at the skill positions, they're in great shape going forward.
Yes, yeah. Exactly. And it'll be a fun conversation to continue for another day, especially as we get closer towards after SEC media days and August recruitments and the first games of the season, which I'm super excited for. We're kind of getting over that hump of not a lot of things happening besides recruiting.
July, outside in the personal world and all that, it's the worst month of the year, in my opinion. I just can't, especially as a sports writer. I think we all agree.
There's an itch that needs to be satisfied when it comes to football.
And now, SEC Media Days, so we're not going to spend too much time on that. We're going to get to the college football 26 ratings after this. But it was announced that, and this happens, A&M is going to speak on Thursday next week. I may make down there, probably not though this year. Kind of sucks, but we're always well covered with A&M beat writers. So it's going to be Torian York, Texas A&M junior linebacker, Armaj Reed-Adams, obviously the starting right guard, and Will Lee, the third A&M starting star cornerback. So those are going to be the player representatives. It was announced today. Not surprised at all. If you want to combine with College Football 26 outside of Will Lee, who was I mean, the rating was very offensive in my opinion, but he got two of the highest rated players on your team. Obviously, Armaj Reed-Adams is the highest rated player on A&M's roster in the game, and Torian York, I think, is a 90 overall. So that, and extremely important to every aspect of their team, right? We expect that, and what's kind of funny is that obviously Reed-Adams and York have been on every preseason team and preseason honors list, because many believe, outside of Anthony Hill at Texas, that Torian York is the best linebacker in the country. And based on, being an elite run defender, They believe that he's going to take that step as a coverage backer and covering tight ends and being really good in that medium deep defensive scheme. And then Reed Adams, who I think a lot of people believe has first-round potential because he honestly is. When I was in my scouting days, especially with O-line, I could really remember every guy and who was really good at everything. Now I really can't. But I would say he's probably the best run defender.
He is the premier run blocker
in the country, and somebody who's just, you're going to see him destroy that linebacker. I mean, it's going to be embarrassing. He's going to bulldoze over so many people, and he's going to be, they're going to be running to the right a lot, I believe, this season.
I've got to agree with you there. But it's going to be fun to see what they have to say, especially the questions that are going to go along with it. Yeah. Like you said, a lot of beat writers that are going to be covering A&M and national media overall.
Yeah, and it's always the national media. They do a decent job. There's always a guy there that kind of asks a very basic question. I don't blame those guys when you're not covering a team specifically. Sometimes you don't know everything. Sometimes you're just kind of asking, well, you lost to Texas. Do you really believe in Marshall? There's going to be a question like that, which I'm going to grit my teeth, and I would even if I was in the room. But it's I expect Carter Carrolls to be there this year. Obviously, I expect Travis Brown. I expect a lot of the great A&M guys to ask A&M specific questions that A&M fans want to know. If I was there this week, I would ask specifics about the defensive back room, how they're looking, progress they've made with Lyle Hemphill, what names have stuck out outside of obviously the premier guys. And, I think that the question should be geared and towards that defense, focused on, do you really believe this offensive line is as good as it is? Do you think it is? And anything relating to Le'Veon Moss's injuries, do you believe that he could possibly be hampered by anything down the line? And obviously there's going to be a lot going into Marshall Reed's improvement. And look, until he plays, and, I can't really talk any more about this, that, has he improved as a passer? Because we talked about it last week, I believe it was either last week or the week before. He just needs to be above average. He needs to be a good quarterback. He does not need to be a great quarterback. Now, there will be situations in the season when maybe the run game isn't working, when, maybe blocking up front isn't great, and maybe the defense is doing all they can, but it's a close game and Marshall Reed has to make plays. Yes, he's going to be judged on those games. But at the same time, I think that Mike Elko is going to do a good job overall answering these questions. He's very confident where this program is going. Obviously, when you're recruiting at the level he is, competing for the number 1 2026 class, I think that helps that swagger. And I think those 3 player choices were perfect because Torrin York was a player representative last year, excellent communicator, great leader, someone you can trust to give you great answers and really give you the truth on what's going on, the progress they've made. When you have someone like Adams and Reed and Will Lee, who are just very loquacious guys and very, very competitive, 2 of the most competitive players at their position. And, I can't wait to watch Will Lee in the NFL. I really can't, because I think he's going to be one of those maybe 3rd, 4th round picks potentially that ends up being a star and ends up being the guy who chirps at every wide receiver after every play, which I love that stuff. And so it's going to be fun to watch him talk about the secondary. I think a guy that I think they should spend some time on is Des Ricks. I think that his improvement, how he's changed parts of his game, because I think he's going to be an important part of this defense, and they're going to need him to play at a high level, because we talked about on the show, obviously this cornerback rotation, there's a lot of unknowns there outside of Will Lee, Julian Humphrey, and Tyreek Chappelle, who's returning for a final season.
Yeah, very, very hopeful. I think you've kind of tickled my brain there, where I think that I think the media or the average fan are kind of looking away right now, especially as we get up towards the season, of the DB room for a little bit. And maybe that's just to kind of help them get them back on their feet as we head up towards the season. But bar none, that DB room does have to be better. So Will Lee being there does not surprise me for media days at all. And we'll get into a little bit more, but I think we have a couple of quick points to hit before we get to our EA College Football 26 ratings. Namely, the first one, I think You hit it a little bit before, and after this point we'll hit the new little baseball information you have. I think before we do that, go back to Evan Jacobson, because I think that it's really, really interesting that he seems like a guy that any single program would take. And you saw a lot of the Notre Dame fans kind of say, hey, we want this guy. And everybody was like, do you even know who this guy is?
Yeah.
But then you see him kind of, I think even Jacobson, either on social media or another news outlet, kind of said, well, Iowa State's kind of in this one. And it got me thinking, which of these guys, because Jacobson is a national basketball player as well.
Mm-hmm.
So he's on that scene as well. So I kind of took a little deep dive. Which of these schools have offered him to play both? And I think the thing is now the finalists all have now where there's an opportunity to play basketball as well as be on the football squad as well. So that relationship with, I believe, Matt Campbell over at Iowa State, maybe you can go a little bit more into that. But I believe he does have that relationship with this new basketball staff here at A&M as well. And there could be a potential spot here on that roster for him as well.
Yeah, Lennon talked about that a little pre-show, and that's why I've heard inklings throughout, is that Iowa State isn't – I don't think he would play basketball there. I don't know if he's a perfect fit there. Obviously, they have a great basketball program, but I don't think that's the case. And I don't think Matt Campbell would want that specifically because he wants his football players to just play football, especially in that scheme. Tight end is more – I don't know if it's equally used in A&M's offense. We haven't really seen what that's going to look like 100% until probably this season. Last season was just a teaser in his first year. But I think Notre Dame offered the same. Notre Dame's basketball program is not great. It's not something that you're like looking forward to overall to play both sports. But I think with Bucky McMillan now, I think he probably is a perfect fit in that system and what they want to run, kind of that fast-paced, offensive-minded scheme, I guess you want to call it. But
it's definitely an interesting part of the recruiting pitch when it comes to these dual sport.
For a lot of those guys, for especially guys like Jacobson, who I believe he's 6'8", 6'7".
I think he's 6'7".
He's 6'7", yeah. So, yeah, I mean, that's a tall boy, and that's somebody who's going to be.
He's a really
he's going to end up being obviously somebody who's going to have to. He's got some blocking ability. He's more of a receiver right now during his junior season at Waukee. But and again, we talked about actually last week with Booby Feaster at DeSoto, lack of quarterback play kind of deters some advancement in your ranking overall. Some believe he's a 5-star prospect. Landon said he's going to have a really good season, but it's going to be hard when you have a quarterback that can't really throw the ball very well, and it's really just short yardage type of stuff. So for Jacobson, he was like, not playing with great quarterback play. He was the main option on third down. He was the main kind of separator because of that size against smaller defensive backs. So when you watch the film, this is somebody who, obviously you're not going to see elite speed or anything like that, but he's more utilized as a flexed wide receiver, a hybrid guy. So those are the guys that Colin Klein loves, because you've seen a lot of the guys that they have gone after. I think it was in the 25 class, a couple guys there that were hybrid wide receivers at tight end because they were playing in smaller competition. So they line out at the X sometimes and just go one-on-one with a smaller DB and just out-contain them and use their catch radius. And he believes that this could be somebody against zone coverage who could thrive once he matures as a wide receiver. But to answer your question, I think that A&M right now, for basketball reasons, outside of Notre Dame, obviously, Notre Dame, yes, historic program. They've done a good job of developing tight ends. Obviously, they've had a couple first-round guys in the last, maybe a handful, I don't even remember. But obviously, they do a good job there. They're very centric to their offense as well. And depending on their quarterback play in the future, they're introducing a new quarterback this season, because it's kind of funny that Notre Dame, they're all good in every area. I keep hearing they're such a well-balanced team. Like, talk about the quarterback, though, because that's a big part of the offense. So you see that now. And I think some of these tight ends who are more offensive-centric, maybe they look at the quarterback future and they see A&M's is maybe better than Notre Dame's right now, especially with some of the guys that are coming in like Hellman Kasuga and other guys they have in the 27 class as well. So it's an interesting concept of dual sport athletes now in today's age, especially. It's like going back to guys who played both sides, which is still incredible to me that there were guys who played both sides at college.
I love it. These are
cool,
my
man,
type of athletes.
Body.
Yeah. Are you kidding me? I go back and watch like T. Higgins basketball tape. Have you seen that?
You'd have to send it to me after the show, but I mean, it's
my
freakish.
goodness. It's
such
guys
a freakish athlete.
guys like T. Higgins, Keon Coleman, Trades Green, who's currently still at LSU. I mean, these guys' basketball tape. I can see why a lot of national scouts will take that into consideration when evaluating their talent for football as well. Because
it's big. It's big for tight end.
Yeah. Same thing for tight end. It's like if you have a basketball background and you play tight end, it's probably going to help the tape and the evaluation in the long run. But really, really cool stuff, especially from Landon. But I just thought it was cool to kind of hit back on it as A&M tries to get Jacobson into the fold. I guess we'll move on to the little bit of baseball
news. Yeah, so that happened last night. Maddox Lada, who had so he's from Cal State, Fullerton. He was, I believe we mentioned him on the show, I'd say like a month ago. I remember hearing some intel from a source when I had a baseball source at that point, who said, he's in the running, but this is a guy who's also an MLB prospect. Yeah. So it's kind of up in the air right now. But he has committed to the program last night. He had a point, trying to think. So I think he started 53 or 56 games and kind of reading ran down. He had a slashing line of 362, 486, and 503, which, again, we're talking about an A&M lineup that just did not hit consistently last season. He now joins Jake Dewar, Chris I always mess the name up. Halkopian, yes. To obviously replace Jace Lavalette, who's departing for the MLB draft. So it's one of those situations where Early deserves a ton of credit right now because he has done this in a very quiet way. He has not made any noise early. He's just kind of chugging away, and especially during the NCAA tournament, when all the attention was on LSU, obviously winning the title, and other schools picking up big commitments. Texas has done a good job. So Jim Schlossing's picked up a lot of good guys, on the mound and for the future lineup. But getting Lada that basically solidifies your offense next season. And now I think the only question is Ryan Prager, is Justin Lampkin, and is Shane Sadeo, are they going to enter the MLB draft, or are they potentially going to come back for one more season? If the latter's the case, A&M is automatically a contender in 2026. And I don't think anybody could deny that. I don't think anybody could dispute that. And I think that they have addressed the issues that plagued them the most this offseason, which was the hitting lineup, which was the batting lineup, which was a lack of consistent offense. You had a lot of guys hitting a ton of home runs, but at the same time, in key games, you weren't scoring enough runs. You weren't matching the opposing offense. And I mean, it killed them in several SEC series.
It really did. And Lada is a guy he is an MLB draft like risk, right?
Yeah.
So, but I think you still have to take a chance on these guys no matter what.
Yeah.
Because 362 is what you said?
Yeah, it was. So yeah, his slashing line was 362, 486, 503. He had a .978 fielding percentage. So that's somebody who I think was also insurance defensively.
Yes.
At that point, so I think they knew that they had to throw that up.
He has Defensive Player of the Year honors from his league. If I'm not correct, over in the Big West.
Yes, he does as well.
But this is a guy you take on the defensive side of baseball. It's still funny for me to say that out loud, but he is he only had like 5 errors in over 150, 200 times.
Yeah.
So you just need that overall consistency. And they've gone time and time again. I think this is 7 or 8 now.
I believe, it's close to time. I think they have 3. I'd have to look, but they have 3 pitching commitments, and I think the rest are infielders, outfielders. So yeah, again, I don't want to get tongue-tied here, but I think that early has shown that this is the reason why Trev Alberts gave him a second chance. I think he's already proven that, because I think a lot of people started to doubt his ability to utilize the transfer portal correctly, which was kind of crazy to me, because I always thought that, look, it's going to be tough either way, because you're competing with every SEC program, you're competing with Big 12 programs, you're competing with Big 10 programs, and it's always going to be tough because some of these guys in this new NIL age, and when we knew that basically every key starter was returning outside of Jace Lavalette in that lineup, and we still haven't heard officials from Caden Kent and Ben Royo. But if you get those guys back, and now you have a lot in the mix with the rest of your additions, look, if you have issues at pitching, like a lot of teams do every year, and you have a new lineup that you believe is going to take some time, at least you have some offense. At least you have something to fall back on, because that was the biggest issue, like we talked about with A&M football, is that you want to talk about the quarterback. Well, I don't want to talk about the quarterback. I want to talk about the defensive lapses that hurt this team last season, because it's always easy to call out the head coach or call out the coordinator, but it's not as easy to call out the specific areas of weakness. But I think every Aggie fan knows that when you can hit the ball consistently, not just home runs, get on base and score runs and do it at a high level and get average to above average pitching, you're going to be an NCAA tournament team. Now, granted, it's going to be hard if you do lose so much starting talent on the mound, but at the same time, we haven't heard anything yet. Maybe that's good news for A&M regarding Prager, Lampkin, and Sadeo, at least 2 out of 3 of those guys. But we'll see. Obviously, the MLB draft is coming up soon, so it's going to be now or never if they commit or not, or if they commit to the program, or if they announce.
Yeah, I mean, you've said it in previous shows, this takes a bit. Baseball takes a bit to actually get fully in depth, and there's a long time to go.
Yeah, and if you're we saw last year, if you're drafted, it doesn't mean you have to commit right away. So Sadeo is going to get drafted, and he can either sign with the team that drafts him, which we don't know. I mean, he's considered a still high-ish pick, but at the same time, if the money's not great and the future is slow, like having to play in the minor leagues for a very long time and having rehab or what may have you, is going to A&M for one more season the best option? I think it is, but again, it's just very unknown with these guys, because Prager, nobody thought that Prager was going to come back. I didn't believe he was coming back, and then he came back. So it's just and Justin Lampkin, I think it's an easier decision for him, but at the same time, he's in that same area as Sadeo, and he had his ups and downs this season. Obviously, he had his best performance against Georgia, so he's kind of riding that high. But I just think that if you're a pitcher, the biggest problem for you last year was you were having really good outings, and the offense couldn't come through. Well, now you have an offense. Now you have guys that on paper at least can help you out. So if you're coming back and you're having a better performance and you can rely on that batting lineup, I don't know why you wouldn't. That's just me, but everybody's going to make the decision monetarily of how their future is going to look. So it's going to be very interesting down the stretch. We've reached now on the show, so we are going to now get to the EA Sports college football ratings. I have not ordered the game yet, personally. I know. How your sports writer? How have you not ordered? Well, look, I'm going to order it. I'm going to get it on Thursday, the drop day, when I have time. I actually have to take my car around on Thursday, so it's going to be a little later than that. But it's going to – I've only heard good things. I've heard, obviously, the graphics are enhanced. I think the gameplay is better, which is not a surprise, because I think after the last game's success, all you can do is make it better. But I'll play it for myself and give my own opinion on that by next week. But we've talked about the ratings for A&M briefly a couple times, and so I kind of have them here. One of my writers at Aggies Wire, Dylan Flippo, wrote a very condensed article, basically giving all the ratings of every team and the players that stood out. A&M is an 88 overall. They're an 89 on offense and a 90 on defense. I think the 90 on defense was interesting to me, because I would have thought that the offense would have been higher just because of the new additions. But it is kind of interesting that the game makers believe A&M's defense is going to be even better than maybe some of us believe. But at the same time, I get that when you have so much talent on each side of the ball. But I think this is what we're going to discuss. We're not going to spend time on Marcel Reed. He's an 85 overall. I think he's a 90. It's like a 92 speed or something. So I think he's the second fastest on the team behind Terry Bussey. But I think the ratings at quarterback that I want to point out first is Jacob Zeno, the senior, is a 76 overall. Brady Hart, who is a freshman, is a 75 overall. Eli Morcos, who is another freshman, who's a 3-star, is a 72 overall. And Miles O'Neill, who I have had people in my article comments saying he should start over Marcel Reed and all this stuff. He is a crisp 67 overall. He's the lowest rated quarterback on the team. I can't do this without laughing. Very confusing. So, and then I'll give you one more. So at running back, we'll go through this pretty quickly. I think this is pretty easy, and then I'll get you to Cannon. Le'Veon Moss is an 89 overall. Amari Daniels is an 86 overall. I think that's pretty fair. Ruben Owens, who did not play last season outside a handful of games, obviously he was injured before the 24 season. He's an 86 overall. EJ Smith is an 83 overall. Yeah. DeAndre Ridden, who's a freshman, is a 77 overall. A couple more freshmen weren't. Jermaine Morrow is not listed. He's not listed right now, one of their freshman backs. And now we're going to get to wide receiver, who I think we can all talk about quickly. Is that Casey Concepcion is a 90 overall. And then it gets really low after that. So Terry Bussey is an 82 overall. I think he deserved a little higher, but I think it's just a lack of play with Mississippi State last year. He played a lot, but he wasn't like the main target. 82 overall, Terry Bussey, I'm sorry, is an 82 overall. Which that's a prove it rating because he's finally switched to wide receiver, which I get. Mario Craver, 80 overall, could dispute that. Jonah Wilson is a 75 overall. Would have thought he's the lowest rated guy. Tristan Norman, freshman, 73 overall. Isaiah Williams, 70 overall. And Ashton Bethel Roman, a 69 overall. I'd love your opinion on that one. That, outside of Miles O'Neill, those two at the lowest, and Tristan Norman and Jonah Wilson being higher rated was very confusing.
Yeah, so it is confusing until you realize that EA, when they are making their overalls, they do like to use a lot of PFF's numbers.
Mm-hmm.
They really like to. So it was really like if you are the incoming freshman, they kind of didn't know off of that point what was going to happen besides either a star rating or how maybe they even went as far as trying to see your yards or production from the wide receiver position in high school. I mean, you see Tristan Norman on that list as a 73 as a full-on freshman, right?
Yeah.
But with Isaiah Williams and Ashton Bethel Roman seeing the limited play that they have, and we saw some really good things coming out of them, they still saw the field, and whether that was a detriment to them or not, they got their PFF grades on those games. So I think that's probably more where they were heading off. It's maybe a little inadvertent and maybe a little there should have been some oversight over it, but I'm not going to fault them for the starting off part of the thing. I mean, we are very, very high on that wide receiver depth, especially the Mario Craver one, where if he has this bright a future like A&M, their staff, fans, everybody thinks he does, he is going to vastly outperform and shine over that 80 overall ranking.
Yes. And so I would say, that makes perfect sense. I'm glad we explained that. So it does, because I think it's a small sample size with Miles O'Neill, especially. He didn't play a ton. They believe that obviously they've seen Jacob Zeno play, so they know what he has. They saw him all those years at UAB. They believe he's going to be the backup. I personally believe that Miles O'Neill is probably going to earn that second spot. I think he's probably going to have a good fall. Some of the better ones and more surprising, I was not surprised by that. So Maury Nyblack, 85 overall. I think that's actually a good rating for him, because I think he's one of those untapped potential guys who could end up being a huge receiving threat for A&M, because he was just not used correctly with Texas. They wanted him to be a blocker. For some reason, I didn't get that. And mainly it was because of the player in front of him. But, they could have used him this coming season, but hey, you're lost. And I think he's going to be a perfect fit with Colin Klein. So Keati Armstrong, the freshman tight end, 79 overall over Theo Malin Ostrom as a junior, who is 76 overall. And I've been very high on Keati Armstrong. I did not know he was going to get this rating. but that's pretty good for that young man who
pretty dang good for Chiatti.
I think he's going to end up getting in this rotation because it was during the Navy All-American Bowl. He had a couple great plays. I mean, this is a kid who could have played defensive end at the next level just based on his size. The fact that he has that type of speed and catchability and just great hands for a guy that big and pretty good route runner, I think he's going to be somebody to look at. On the offensive line, this is not surprising. Now, Lamont Rogers, who is the 5-star freshman signee, he's at 80 overall, which I do agree with that because I think if he was committed to a lower-rated program, I think he'd be an immediate starter. Like the fact that Trey Zoon, who's an 88 overall, A&M starting left tackle, obviously you're not going to be starting with an A&M, but down the line, he's going to end up being Texas A&M starting left tackle, maybe even going on next season. We will see. So the rest of the offensive line is pretty interesting. Chase Bisonsis was an 86 overall, which makes sense. Converting to guard, finally, that's where he's shining. That's where his NFL potential is. And then Ashton Funk, who I thought was 76 overall. So that's somebody who's going to end up, we talked about being a starter for A&M. So it's good they kind of see that type of potential. Izendra Afua was a 74 overall. These are two players that could end up being starting guards for A&M in the near future. And then center, so finish out right guard, obviously, Marjorie Adams, the highest overall, 93. Behind him, you got Blake Ivy, 76 overall. Right tackle is kind of interesting because we know that Demetrius Crownover is probably going to be the starter at right tackle, most likely, because most consistent, doesn't have a long industry history behind him. For those who have forgotten, Ruben Fadler, he's still with this program. He's just, poor guy's dealt with a lot of injury problems. He's an 81 overall. Still, again, this was somebody who I keep reading Will, the pass rusher from Alabama back in the day, I think, who plays for the Texans, Will Anderson, who Ruben Fadler, I think, was the only one who could block him. So I think he's earned that rating when healthy. I think he still is one of the better pass protectors. And then we get into the defense.
Ooh, defense.
This is really what I want to talk about after getting over wide receiver. So at edge, and we're talking about the newcomers. So TJ Searcy out of Florida, he's an 80 overall, very respectable, great run defender, has some pass rush to him. Deion Hayes has dealt with a lot of injury issues over his years with Pitt and Colorado for one season, but great pass rusher, played very well during the spring game. He's a 78 overall. Rylan Kennedy, who PFF, this is based on PFF probably, 76 overall. And then freshman Landon Rink, who's one of the strongest kids. He embarrasses me as somebody who lifts weights all the time. He's 73 overall, which isn't surprising. I think he could end up being a star at the next level if his strength translates to the field. And then we get to right edge. Cassius Howell is an 88 overall. I was kind of a stickler there. I think Cassius Howell is going to end up being one of the best, or maybe the best pass rusher in the SEC this season. I think he's just it's not just me. It's almost every other beat writer for A&M who has pointed him out, saying like he's got every trait you can think of. He was the team's best pass rusher, I believe, per PFF last season in a team that had Nick Scorton, Shamar Stewart, and Shamar Turner. So that's saying something. And he's obviously going to enter the season as the team's best pass rusher. I think 88 is respectable, but I think it's more of let's see what you can do against competition, and then we'll raise that ranking. And go ahead.
Maybe I'm in the minority, but I think that's exactly where I might have him.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think before, I think it was being inflated. I think it was an 86 overall, and I think it's now officially an 88 overall. So I think he's gained some respect there. And I'll just run through the rest of these edge rushers. So Jaden Scarlett, who another guy who kind of forgot was on the roster. I mean, he stayed the course, and he is a 75 overall. He should be a guy that actually finally makes in the rotation based on some of the departures. Sam Mpemba, I always mess up his name, transfer from Georgia. He's a 75 overall. Solomon Williams, someone I'm very high on as a defensive end, as a pass rusher. Solomon is a 74 overall. Then you've got Christian Jackson, the 73 overall, and Kendall Jackson, who was their 4-star signee, who's a 72 overall.
Now, I do want to point out to people that some of these names are placeholder names for people who are not in the game yet.
Yeah.
So you're going to see that down the line, especially when you load up the game. There are going to be a lot of people on the depth that they're not in the game. And that's just how it is. They're either going to be placeholders until they're in the game, or they're just going to be placeovers.
Yeah, you have to agree. Yeah, everybody has to come to agreement.
With Terry Bussey last year.
Yeah.
So that's kind of why I think that it's really interesting that Samuel Mpemba is that 75 overall. He's one though where I would have pegged as like someone more in the eyes of like PFF, where he would have some of these attributes. And maybe I haven't really loaded up the game as well. Maybe he does have some of these attributes that kind of stick out to people.
A lot of it's potential, right? Because I think when they got, and I think they did a good job there. This is actually very accurate in my opinion, because I think when you go and get a TJ Searcy, you know exactly what he's going to bring. You run defense, and hopefully because of his length and because he played in the SEC, maybe you're going to get some pass rush there. They're hoping Dayon Hayes stays healthy because he is one of the better pass rushers. He's already shown that throughout his entire college career. He's also an older guy, and those injury issues do kind of worry you a bit. Rylan Kennedy has just not shown it consistently. He's a guy that we talk about all the time of what he can be, and then they'll say, well, he hasn't done enough yet. Well, this is, again, a big year for him because outside of Cassius Howe, who else is there that's going to be dependent on? Well, you're going to get a lot of play time, a lot of snaps to prove that you can be a consistent force both against the run and against the pass. So they did a good job there. I think defensive tackle and Sam will, and then we'll kind of move into linebacker and finish it out. Defensive tackle is interesting because Tyler Onienum, we hyped him up a lot. I think everybody who covers A&M hyped him up a lot. I remember writing an article basically telling Mike Elko if he saw it, I don't know, offer this kid. He's great. I remember he was the winner. I said, please offer this kid. He's a perfect fit for your defense. Maybe he read it. Doesn't really matter now. But either way, he's an 88 overall, which makes a ton of sense. He was just wrecking the offense during his snaps in the spring game. Just a perfect fit. Kind of a tweener defensive tackle, someone who could play in a 3-4, so he's got that edge type of ability as well, but he's most likely in the lineup inside. Albert Regis, who I believe is one of the better defensive tackles, just a great run defender. I think he had like 9 pass deflections last season. It's just a crazy number, but just knows football. He's a consistent force, someone you can depend on. DJ Hicks, who we talked about last week, is an 81 overall.
This is a show me year.
It's a show me year for him. And I think out of any player outside of Marcel Reed, and that's mainly just because he's the quarterback, this is basically the show me what you can do, Mr. 5-star, right? That's just kind of how it is because he knows how talented he is.
100% how it is.
And he knows now it's freed up for him to thrive. Like there's nobody in front of him. There's not a Nick Scorton there that's going to take away anything. Like we're depending on you to provide a pass rush up the middle and get up those A and B gaps and get in the quarterback's face. Because if you can't do that and you can't stop the run, well, it's going to be kind of a downturn with your football career. And he knows that. Like that's the thing. Hicks knows that every time he's in front of the media, he's talked about it. Like I know the pressure I'm under because, I mean, if you are a kid of that stature who is regarded as one of the best defensive tackles coming out of recruiting history, you know that when you're with a school like A&M and you've been a starter now for the last 2 years and you just haven't produced at a high level, they are depending on you. And it's up to you to get in that weight room, continue getting stronger, refine your game. So I think 81 is pretty fair.
I think that is too. I mean, it's really good. I know we're kind of running low on time, so I guess we'll just get
through Dylan Evans, freshman, 79 overall. Now we're going to get to linebacker.
Yeah, we'll go over to
we'll focus on Mike and Will. So yeah,
Mike and Will, the tandem duo of Torian York and Scooby Williams being 90 overall for Torian York, one of the I believe the second highest, tied for the second highest overall on A&M squad, with Marcel Reed, or no, not Marcel Reed. Who am I thinking of?
Casey Concepcion.
Casey Concepcion, yes.
The 90 overall.
And Scooby Williams being 83 over in that Mike spot. It's going to be a very, very fun. I believe A&M in the game runs a 4-2-5 defense from what I've seen. So it'll be really fun to see. And you have guys like Damian Sanford, who's backing up Scooby Williams in the game.
77 overall.
77 overall. That's a pretty good overall for him.
And then we'll finish out with cornerback, and then safety's kind of interesting. I think the most interesting part of the safety rotation is Dalton Brooks. But really a cornerback, look, they obviously think very high of A&M's quarterback room, which is interesting to me. You've got Will Lee, 87 overall, Julian Humphrey, 85 overall, Georgia transfer, Bravion Rogers, who's a name a lot of people have kind of forgotten about. He's been buried on the depth chart. I remember hearing inklings about him playing safety and switching there. That's not going to happen. I think he's finally going to get into that rotation, show what he's got. 84 overall, so they think highly of him. Maybe that's a PFF thing. Des Ricks, obviously show me year for him, 81 overall. Jordan Shaw, transfer from Washington, 80 overall. Tyrese Chappelle, 80 overall. Think that's got to be injury issues because that's not the best rating for somebody who they consider probably the best cornerback on their team. I mean, any coach you ask outside of Willie. Javon Thomas, another guy, very big prove year for him. Stayed at 79 overall. Dejon Pettigrew is a freshman, 76 overall. Jordan Pride, 70 overall. We're going to get to free safety. Bryce Anderson is an 84 overall. I think that is fair because I think that he had a bad down year, and then you got a couple guys behind him in high 70s, and then Dalton Brooks, who's an 87 overall, followed by Marcus Radcliffe, 78 overall.
Get it.
And Rashad Johnson, 75 overall. We'll end on that. So those two say the cornerbacks I get outside of Tyrese Chappelle. We don't have to spend enough time with that, but Bryce Anderson, an 84 overall. I don't know. I would have made him maybe switch that out with DJ Hicks and put him in 81 overall because I think that he had probably his worst season yet. But I personally believe I've talked about this with my team at Aggies Wire and anybody else who's asked me about it. This is the biggest year for him, and I think he deserves some grace because he was a quarterback in high school that had to switch to free safety, learn how to play that position, which is very tough for when you're going translating from offense. And I think having Lyle Hemphill now in that coaching room, I think he's going to end up having probably his best season in coverage at least. But I think the fact that they think very highly of Dalton Brooks, very interesting to me.
Yeah, A&M fans, people will remember there were talks of A&M fans saying, hey, can we put Dalton Brooks at running back after all these running back injuries that they had? And there were some honest conversations people had with themselves. But we'll end up in the show with who is the one player out of all these overalls that you think could be bumped up the most, or you are personally standing on your soapbox for to have an overall bump?
I think it's Ashton Beth Roman. That's mainly because I have seen a good trajectory, and I think the fact that our guy Landon and others have pointed him out as somebody who could really take the top off the defense, who could end up having a really strong fall camp. I think he's already shown he's a very crisp route runner. He's got kind of that. I would kind of compare him to where Aaron Gregory is right now. Kind of the way he plays, kind of that fluidity in his route running. He's a skinnier guy, but he's very quick, and he's obviously got elite speed. Obviously, we've heard 4.3 at this point, track level speed, and a lot of untapped potential there. And I think it's going to be either him or Isaiah Williams, who's going to come out of nowhere. And I think that's going to be the biggest thing for A&M's offense to really take that step, because you know what you have with Casey Concepcion. You kind of know what you have with Mario Craver for the most part, and I think he's going to show consistency. And then you do know what you have with Terry Bussey, but again, that's his first full season as wide receiver. Yeah. But I think one of those two guys, and I think that when you play the game, I think you're going to see that you can have a very good time throwing the ball to both those guys because they're going to play above their rating. And really two names I'm going to keep sticking out. That's who you should focus on. And then one more, I'll say Des Ricks. I think Des Ricks finally kind of learns how to play cornerback at the SEC level. I think that when you have such a bad season like he did and you get clowned as much as he did, I think when you have a guy like Julian Humphrey, who was also clowned for basically 2 plays against Alabama, against Ryan Williams last season, who I remember when Aggie fans were making fun of him for that. When it's one game, you try playing cornerback against Ryan Williams when he's like the hottest wide receiver in the country. It happens. But I think for Ricks, I think there's so much there because he was a 5-star prospect. And the reason he was a 5-star prospect was because of traits. So if you can put together all those things that you have to do well at playing football at the college level, and you take in coaching, then I think you can. And again, a lot of it's eye discipline. It's being at the place you need to be. It's, I think Elko is going to do a good job of scheming these guys out to make it easier for them in the back end.
Absolutely.
So That's another name, but overall, I think they did a good job, and I think A&M is deservedly ranked high. We'll see if they come through this season.
Yeah, I think the one person I'm standing on my soapbox, my homer pick, as soon as I pick up the game, I am subbing in Levi Hancock at tight end. That is my high school teammate. I will be getting him from junior, senior. I will be getting him drafted to the NFL.
Okay.
So that is the person. A 69 overall, it just will not do.
That's not bad, though. I mean, you can
bump up to at least a 75. EA, come on.
You can only rise from there.
So Levi, if you're watching, I got you.
All right. There we go. All right. Yeah, that was a fun show. I mean, I think we covered everything we could, and then we're going to have a lot to talk about, obviously, next week, no matter what happens. We will
100%.
most likely do a reaction show. If Lamar Brown ends up committing to A&M. If not, we will be back next Tuesday to discuss everything. Most likely have landed on. But overall, yeah, I mean, closing points, I guess, for today is you really can't doubt Mike Elko anymore. And I think that
Not anymore.
He was nominated for the Dodd Trophy today's Tuesday, on Monday, along with a host of very successful coaches. I thought it was very interesting. And granted, Brent Venables was on there, which I'm kind of like, okay, so maybe they're kind of including a lot of coaches that maybe don't deserve it, but I think people are finally recognizing that you deserve to have one bad year. And I think that if you follow what Steve Sarkisian did at Texas, he did not have a good start. This was a team that was losing to Kansas at the end of the year. This was a guy who had to rehab his career at Alabama, and then he got this big job, and he had to rebuild from scratch, and he had to recruit at a high level and utilize the transfer portal. And then he led A&M or Texas to 2 consecutive college football playoff appearances, and they got pretty far. Let's say, to be honest, if Arch Manning was playing, maybe they would have won the championship. I don't know.
You don't know.
They kept Quinn Ewers in there, so it's their fault. Either way, I think that people, and I think national media, from what I've read and what I've seen, is that, yes, this season is critical. And if A&M wins 9 or 10 games and gets to the college football playoff, I think it's just you're just off from there. You're off and running now because you finally laid the foundation. You've done what you had to do. And that sends a message to the remaining uncommitted guys. That sends a message to your committed guys. This is what we're building here. No more 8-4 A&M. No more laughing stock. Oh, you can't make it. You can't win that final game. I think that's starting to go out the window a bit. I just think that it's hard for A&M fans right now because of the way things finished last year. But I think we've talked about it ad nauseum on the show, and we'll continue to do so, that things happen for a reason. And when you lose your best players and your defense doesn't come through, you're going to lose football games, especially in the SEC. So you got to pray for health, but you've got to be ready for fall ball, and you've got to be healthy. You got to stay healthy. You've got to focus on improving in the areas that failed you last year. And once you get past that first half of the season, and let's remember A&M was 7-1 at that time, you just got to push through, and you've got to push through. You've got to have toughness. You've got to have immense focus, and you've got to stick to your principles as a team. And if that happens, I think this team's going to go very far. So we're very, very close. We're less than 50 days away, I think, from the 2025 opener. And so it's going to be interesting knowing that you, Cannon, are now my official co-host, and we slide this till the end. It's going to be a lot of fun times ahead, making that official announcement. Obviously, I don't think maybe a lot of people knew that. So these are the 2 guys you're getting from now on every Tuesday.
You're stuck with us.
Yeah, you're stuck. You're stuck for a while, and you're stuck for the season. And it's going to be very, very fun. Can't wait. I really cannot wait to cover this team with you during the 2025 campaign. We're going to leave it there. Yep, we're going to leave it there. We'll be back next Tuesday. Obviously, Lamar Brown is going to be whatever he chooses. We might be back sooner, but if not, if he does choose LSU, we'll be here to talk about it. But as we said, nothing is set in stone until these guys sign with the team. You can follow me at Cameron Honesty, obviously, on my writing at Aggies Wire with USA Today College Wires. You can follow Cannon at Torres Cannon and all his great stuff on X. One of the better recruiting guys out there, really rising star in that aspect. We will be back next Tuesday, like I said, at 7 p.m. every Tuesday from now on. And sending my thoughts and prayers, obviously, to everybody in Texas. I mean, it's a devastating occurrence. And obviously, it's just one of those things where the earth can shake you off sometimes. And you got to realize that that things like this happen, and hopefully our political leaders come into action and do what they're supposed to do. But keeping everybody in my thoughts and prayers. I could tear up right now just thinking about everybody who's lost. But this is why we do these things. We do things like this to cheer people up. We do things like this to talk about football and just have a good time. So
our thoughts and prayers go out to everybody. So please, everybody, make sure you stay safe. Make sure you are taking care of yourself. Yeah. So this has been Cameron and Cannon on the Voice of College Football Network over on Texas A&M Aggies Live. We hope you all have a great rest of your week.
All right. See you then, guys. Dig 'em as always, and we will see you next Tuesday.